I am a different person than I was 4 years ago. I found sometimes the most I've learned about myself is times where I've had to sink or swim. Moved to Hong Kong. I didn't know anyone other than my partner. I had to make friends, sink or swim.
Mate, I'm not gonna lie, a year ago, and I've said this a few times, I could not fucking swim. I could not swim, which is quite important when one of the fundamental parts of an Ironman is swimming.
But I think it's a really important thing that you were saying there is like that your granddad said, which is a great lesson, is just try stuff. So Alex, part 3 of the Supercharged Collective here today.
Nice.
So like, I'll let you do a proper intro this time. But for anyone that doesn't know who you are, give us an overview of Alex.
Right. So I really like, and I've taken a lot of the stuff I take from Mr. Dean Hammond, as always, and he won't mind me saying that because I do. I just bounce off him quite a lot, which is brilliant. But I've actually started. I used to do podcast intros where I'd be like, fucking former women's. Oh, can I swear on this, Simon? By the way, pre-learning from that. I'll try not to, but
straight away, my friend.
Nice, because otherwise this would go horribly wrong. I'd be like, oh my god, I just swore every 2 minutes, not on purpose. But anyway, so I used to be like, former women's commando. I used to be like all this stuff that are just accolades of like bits, whereas actually, really, who I am is a little bit weird. I am going to try and get diagnosed at some point to see if I do have ADHD, because I'm pretty sure I do. Dyslexic young man who is just a bit nuts, with a fantastic partner called Rebecca, who is a mental health and exercise practitioner, who's pretty cool. She's a very interesting woman. And then also myself, who runs, well, I suppose that's me as a person, a little bit mad. But what I do is obviously run the Warriors, which is a men's confidence program that we run in terms of like helping them with mentally, physically, emotionally improve. I am a mental health and exercise coach from the MHEC award from Dan Hancock, which is very interesting. We'll probably get into that in a minute. Recently, like we're probably going to talk about in a minute, just done an Ironman, which was grim, absolutely disgusting, mate. We'll go into that in a minute. But that, as an overall, is basically me. A little bit mad is probably the best way to describe myself. Yeah, that's me, really, mate.
I want to go into that statement because, like, on a recent post, you mentioned that you're not normal and that you're okay with that, which was relation to your training. But I think there's more to that line. So, like, tell me a little bit what your thoughts on the word normal are and why you're okay with not being it.
So me and you have both done, you've actually graduated and gone through TMP in terms of that process. And I'm sort of recently working with Dan. I actually realised we're only like 4 sessions in, but a lot of these things, you know, when you go through, like, I hope you don't mind me saying that, by the way, Sam. You probably mentioned that somewhere, I'm guessing. But I've just revealed that to the world, as in, like, I was going to say.
Of course.
Like, and a lot of the stuff we uncover
there
more and more.
There's not a dirty thing about therapy.
Exactly. But like, there is a weird stigma behind it in there, especially with blokes. But like, there isn't really. But I think, like, as a kid, you know, I was a bit of a shit at school. Like, I didn't really concentrate on things. I wasn't very, like, you know, I didn't want to be in a classroom. I wanted to be, like, practically learning. And that, like, there was a lot of times. So as I say, I'm very heavily dyslexic. So there was a lot of times, I don't remember all of it, but getting pulled out of classes and being like, look, we're going to have to sit you down with someone individually and we're going to have to go through this stuff a little bit more with you. Because it wasn't quite, you know, as I say, the norm. I didn't learn in the normal way of doing things. I also think that, like, I don't know. I almost sometimes, fucking hell, that's a weird thought. I almost sometimes feel like I'm living a second life. So, like, there was one life where Alex was very boring. You know, he just made sensible decisions. He just did things that were just like, you know, that normal people do. It was like, I'll go get a job. I'll do this. I'll stick with this career for a long period, and then I'll retire and I don't know, go play golf or something. Right? That was like a normal, like, Alex version. Maybe we've been there, but I make a lot of like decisions pretty much based on the idea of, like, I know and, like, inherently have really realised there is a sudden end. Like, there is going to be a point of, you know, this is going to go wrong. So I think that's kind of why I would say I'm not really that normal. Like, most people, and this is kind of what I would give an example of, would join the Marines, and most of the lads that I know are still in the military because they're like, it's a good career, it's well paid for what you're doing. It isn't really that well paid, but we know that now. But, like, you know, and it's got a good prospect of a pension, and you've worked really hard to get into that position. So that's kind of the norm. Whereas I was like, after 5 years, I want to go try something new. Let's give someone else, you know, a go. And I kind of just, I don't know. I suppose that's why, like, I'm a bit wacky in some of the things that I do. Like, I'm not really scared to make a decision based upon something that's a little bit different to what everyone else is doing, if I consider it, like what I want to go and do. I suppose that's kind of why I describe myself a bit nuts. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Is that part of the reason why you said recently that you actually like helping people do the things that they feel they couldn't do, like give them that little push? Is it because at some point you felt you needed that push to get out of that quote unquote normal?
100%. Like, so we're going very, very far back. I've had probably, I was thinking about this the other day, like 5 or 6, like full on, like people who've really mentored me through a lot of different things. So the first action step, I suppose, I took to kind of not go down the path that, society would consider, normal is like I left school, I had, the GCSEs as a basic level, but I didn't have massive amounts of education. Then from there, I went and worked in Topman and Burton's. That was like the 2 places, and a box factory. And I kind of at that point was like a year and a half, just like ticking along. I was kind of like, just like, oh, okay, I'm doing this. It's okay. It's not too bad. I'll just sort of carry on this. And there were some lads in, I'm not slating box factories. If you need to work in a box factory, that's fantastic. That's what we want to do. But if you don't want to work there and you carry on doing that and don't make any processes to change, that's where I'm saying that potentially there's something wrong. And anyway, luckily, I had the fortunate ability to meet a guy called Di Phillips, who, really interesting guy, actually, Simon. He's a massive Welshman, MBE, Royal Marines Major. You can imagine what that bloke looks like. He's like 6'4". His hands are like twice the size of mine. He's that type of bloke, and he's just like, you look at him and you're like, he's a lovely guy, absolutely like brilliant guy. But you look at him and you're like, you are just like terrifyingly scary. But at the same time, like really, like he's just really like well spoken, really like rugby style lad. Anyway, he's about 40, 50. He's not a lad, but you know what I mean. He's that type of guy. But met him, and then I went to a Bicton College, was the place I went for there for 2 years, and he kind of introduced me to the idea of like you would be able to join the Marines. That was something you definitely could do. I've talked about this quite openly. I was arrested when I was very young for running away from home. I smashed up the house. I was very like frustrated with life. And he was like, look, your accolades and what you want to do, your energy is not best put going down the routes of what you're going to now. Let's put you channeled into something that is difficult that you can move forward with. And kind of, like you said, gave me that initial kick. And there's been like 5 or 6 or 7 other stories along the way with other mentors or other people who've kind of given me that little push to be like, just go and fuck it. It's literally like, I imagine it's just like someone being like, you're stood on the edge of like about to jump off a cliff into some water that you're not sure what it's like. And someone just comes along and they push you and they're like, just get on with it. Like, that's kind of what I look at, like some of the guys along the way in the last like almost 30 odd years, really, that my life in that sort of term.
What made you... Yeah, well, like, because the interesting thing is, I've only known you for a relatively short period of time, and you seem one of the happiest, bubbliest people I've met in a long time. What made you frustrated with life back then to the extent that it got to you running away from home and smashing up the house?
I think, like as a young kid, I think like I wasn't doing very well academically, and constantly I was told, and it was sometimes like an underlying thing. But it was also something that, like, physically, like, literally, someone was saying, "You won't do well at life." Like that was kind of like the taste that I was getting, and that what frustrated me, I think, the most is like when you are dyslexic or you've got ADHD or like any of these things, your brain doesn't work in a normal way. So it's a little bit like we talk about the analogy of you're comparing a fish's ability to climb a tree. If you keep telling a fish it's shit, eventually it's gonna be like, "Oh, this is fucking annoying." So that was kind of what happened, I think, for me. It was just, I was constantly frustrated with life. And like as a young, testosterone-filled young lad, filled with energy and this sort of process of like just being annoyed, that was kind of where I was at. I think, to come back to that as well, sometimes I do get like, I've gone through some quite dark patches, and we can touch upon that if you want, because definitely the Ironman has been like something to get me out of that. And like, I've gone through quite a lot of waves over the last like 30 years of like, and this is quite, this is quite a norm for a lot of people. And like when you go into, right, I'm gonna put a disclaimer before I say anything about this. When you go into what mental illness and mental health are 2 very different things. Like Becca, she would be in a position, because as a practitioner, to deal with someone who's got mental illness. She used to work in a mental illness ward in, I won't say the ward for obvious reasons, but she used to work in a ward where she was there. She now works in mental health, and it's a different ward. But Anyway, long story short, like mental illness and mental health are different because mental illness is a like biological chemical reaction. A doctor, a physician, these people need to deal with it. Mental health, however, is very different. Like mental health is more of a problem. It's similar to fitness. You can solve the problem through actions based upon that. But the diagnosis, you need to have an understanding of which one is which before you help someone. Anyway, long story short, I've had a lot of mental health problems in my life. And like on the surface, you can seem really happy, really bubbly, really fine. But like potentially, and this is probably a lot of guys, is behind closed doors, you're miserable as fuck. You're really uninspired, unaspirational, unenergetic. And that's been what over a long period has been a problem. I get the worst, and this is maybe what was happening when I was younger, when I don't feel that something is moving anywhere or exciting or there's no progression or there's no like future in things. And I think when you're, as a kid, I was kind of constantly told like, oh, don't aim too high, don't expect too much. Like, oh, if you don't get the right education, you're not going to do very much, or you're not going to do these things, or be a bit careful. And I think that's what pissed me off is I was like, you kind of feel trapped in this like bubble of like, you want to break free. You want to go and do shit, literally just go and do stuff. And people are like, oh, be a bit cautious, don't worry about this. And I think that's the main thing that used to piss me off as a kid, really. Does that make sense? Does that make any sense? I think so.
Makes total sense. It's interesting when you talk about that in terms of like, because I felt the same way. Like I've gone through my own version of dark patches, but nothing crazy. Like I had a very similar thing. It was always he never lives up to his potential, and like relationships ending and burnout and things like this. But like not like chat to Dean and he's talking about people blowing up and stuff like this, and I'm like, I've never had that. But I wonder if sometimes you often get a lot of this with people having problems with their mental health. Is that it's a difference between the expectation of life versus the reality of life.
Yes.
And it's always people that are driven that feel that it could be doing more, but they're feeling they're not doing what they need to, that really struggle. Because there are other people on the planet, like my dad, right? My dad seems totally happy, totally content. Maybe behind closed doors he isn't, but with way less than I'd be happy for. So it's one of those things like what would even be the solution to that? Do you set expectations lower so people go, look, this is what life's going to give you, and just manage it and make it well, so people don't have this big debt shooting for the stars? Or do you tell everyone they can shoot for the stars and get the opposite problem when 70% of them crash and burn?
Completely, yeah. I completely get what you mean, because like life is actually inherently quite boring. Like most of life is quite boring. Like I would probably argue 90% of like the daily work, 90%, building a business, being a coach, like all of these facades that people put on Instagram of like this highlight reel of bullshit is not real. Like it isn't. That your life isn't constant entertainment or like constant processes of that. I think for me, and this is something maybe especially over the last like 5 years, I've learned a lot more about like me as a person since I've left the Marines. And like, I think the idea for me, definitely, which helps me, is having a future that's set out, right? So let's say it is, an Ironman, or it is like a business idea. It's an amount of clients, it's a turnover, it's something you're excited about in the future, but being able to focus back on what currently is going on and inherently enjoy like the little shitty bits, and not shitty bits as in a negative way, as in like the bits that you're just always doing. And when I have those two, I feel all right. If I don't, and I've got neither of those, that's when it's quite a struggle. But I agree with you, mate. Like, everyone, you're not a special snowflake. You're not really. Like, not everyone is going to go and be that person, or not everyone is going to go and do that particular thing. Not everyone will. But actually, like, you can't tell people they're not that person because they get like personally offended. It's hard, isn't it? That's a very, very good thought process and question of like, how do you solve that? How do you say to people, don't aim high, don't do this? Or at the same time, do you say, actually, the realities is quite a lot of your life is going to be fucking boring? And yeah, so it's mad, isn't it? It's mad to how you deal with that, really.
But I think, and I'm very want to be very careful not to get into the habit of saying social media is bad, because like I wouldn't be on this call with you if it wasn't for social media, right? I met Ollie through social media. Everybody I met on Wednesday that I knew already, I met through social media. So social media still has the ability to be the most social thing in the world and can actually bring people together. But with every with every light that Pat Davidson talked about, I had Pat Davidson on the show a couple of times, and he talked about his struggles with mental health and addiction being like a mountain. So there's a light side of the mountain, there's a dark side of the mountain. When you first go through either side, you get caught up because because the base of a mountain is bigger than the peak. So you're like, oh my God, life's amazing. And then you go, oh my God, I'm never getting out of this hole. But as you get up, you're more appreciative of the light and the dark. But also you're aware that these things happen quicker, right? And I thought this was a really great analogy. And I think the downside of social media is that now we're saying this expectation debt. Whereas I always use the analogy of like, in the 50s, right? You compare yourself to the people on your street. Dave has a boat. Ooh, Dave's got a conservatory. I want a conservatory. Yeah. And the thing with that is you're competing to the people on my street probably paying similar rents to me.
Yeah.
So I'm only competing to people that are in my wheelhouse. So I can be competitive. Whereas now I'm comparing myself to Logan Paul. I'm comparing my physique to Chris Bumstead. I'm comparing my intellect to Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, it's mad.
Well, exactly. So now we have this thing where our expectations of what we can achieve are based off the global elite. And like we are now around here. Yeah. And even like I think you did a good job of you did a good job of showcasing your Ironman as a of how it was going through the processes and the struggles you faced. But even so, I see the picture, I see you sat next to your bike, and I go, you're showcasing done another cycle. Yeah. Oh, I've crossed the finish line. Yeah. And people don't see the days where you went, I don't want to train. It's cold. It's wet. I feel like shit. And you did it. All the days where you didn't. And I'm sure there were days like that too.
100%. Like I'll be really open and honest here. So like some of the biggest things I think, and you know, it might be, fuck me, can I say that and it not sound really big headed? Yes, I can, I suppose. Gold medal, they say like when gold medal.
Can.
Yeah, so gold medal Olympic athletes, they'll achieve a gold medal and it's the saddest day of their life after. You know, they like you said, they've climbed that mountain, they've achieved that process. The day after I passed out the Marines was the most depressing day of my life. Like, as in, I physically went home and just fucking cried and was sat there like, I don't know what I'm going to fucking do now. And like anyone who's, you know, in the military can be like, oh, fucking whatever. But like, the reality being is from the age of like pretty much 15 is when I decided that was going to be the thing that I was going to do. And then you sort of achieve this thing and then there's no satisfaction after and you're looking for the next goal. You're looking for the next process. And the Ironman for me was a couple of reasons. One, my granddad passed away in 2021. Yeah, 2021. So he passed away, no, not 2 years ago. It would have been, no, last year. Passed away last year. So he passed away last year. Really Welsh bloke. I can say this now because it's been released. He was in MI5. It was like quite literally, Simon, like an operator, as in like just like fucking the guy, right? Like, yeah, like full on the guy, right? He's a pretty interesting guy. There's loads of stories about him. Like he is just
Bond.
Like, well, yeah, not quite like Bond, but a lot of like stuff with safe houses, a lot of stuff in, you know, the Second World War, all that stuff. Anyway, very interesting bloke. And he had so many stories. And I remember sort of being sat there with him early days before he was diagnosed with cancer and like really going back like quite far away and talking through some of this stuff because we sort of like, as we got older, we were like, just so you know, this is going to come out in a book. This is who Dennis is. And it was like, oh, okay. And it was like, you know, just having a conversation. But anyway, we're talking through this stuff. And it's just me and him. I'll try not to get too emotional with this. Talking through all this stuff. And I remember thinking, there was points where I was thinking about the idea of like, I finished the Marines. And once I finished that, I didn't really set anything else big and aspirational or like anything to continue moving forward with. There was like a little bit of what do I do next? And he had done, like he passed out the RAF, went from the RAF, had a period where he left, went into MI5, did a long career in MI5, did a lot of shit, and then kind of like carried on. And I'd like left the military at this point. So I was a bit like, what do I now do? What's the next thing? Anyway, long story short, I was like, right, he's incredibly Welsh. He's just passed away. Let's do Wales Ironman because that's like a thing. But also a little bit deeper into that, my dad is really, really into cycling. Like he loves it. You know, he's I was saying this to you the other day, wasn't I? About like he's rapid. He's got a really quick 5K time. He does like 20, 40K every weekend on the bike. Like he loves it. He absolutely loves it. Really good swim. I'm going to get him to do a sprint triathlon. And one of the happiest times of my life. So to add a bit of context to this, when Dennis passed away, it was a little bit. Well, it wasn't a little bit. It was a hero that had passed away for me. It was like this guy that had like always been a little bit allured in the background as the oh, that's Dennis, that's like the godfather of this family, really, if that makes sense. But like anyway, when he passed away, it was a little bit like, oh shit, like the next person who's probably going to pass away at some point will be the next generation, which is my dad, my mum, all these people. So I went into quite a heavy spiral of like, I broke up with Becca at the time. I just fucking lost my shit, mate. Like I just, I as I say, reverted back to some really bad habits, a lot of stuff that was just not going very great. I had a really interesting chat. Sorry, I'm going full on here, but it's all good. Really interesting chat with one of my really good friends who's called Scott Booth. Now, Scott Booth is very similar to me in terms of a little bit older, so he's about 10 years older, but he left the Marines and then he had quite a hard lull of like just not really sure what he was doing with himself. He didn't want to do that job anymore, but he wasn't really 100% sure what he was going into next. And he actually said that the Ironman helped him rebuild his self-confidence, rebuild who he was. So there was a few reasons. One, it was to start cycling again with my dad, because that was like the most important thing, was to like spend more time connecting with him. One of the happiest times of my life was in 2013 when me and him, I was coming home from Scotland quite often, or I was coming home from Plymouth quite often when I was based down there, and just always cycling and running with him. So that was kind of like a happy point. So I was like, if I'm going to rebuild some happiness, get on the fucking bike with dad. So it kind of started with that, and then it went into, right, let's look at like what we can do that is the next thing that's like exciting, that you have a good story about. And I think Dennis would have been happy with that, because he's always said that to me. He's always been like, just try things. Just go and give things a go, see what happens with all this different stuff and just see how it is. So that's always been quite an interesting thing for me. But yeah, and like you said, mate, there were fucking a lot of days. Like there were a lot of days where I did not want to get on a bike. I'll be honest, there were a lot of days where I didn't complete the 4 weeks worth of training that, James and the Omnia team gave me. There were a lot of days where things aren't great. Even the actual race, there were points in the, do you want me to go through the points in there that were shit? Like there were points in there that were just horrendous, mate. I was like, this is not enjoyable at all. This is fucking shit. I don't know if you've done any like cycles or anything, but like the 70.3s, I think they're fun. Like those are the thing, are like enjoyable. I did one in Staffordshire, and if you look at the difference, mate, in the pictures, Staffordshire half. So Staffordshire half is a half a distance of the Ironman. You can do like they call it 70.3. Smiling, I'm excited, I'm really happy, I'm like buzzing to do it. On Wales, mate, all of the pictures I got back, apart from like 3 or 4, are just me miserable. Just me sat there like, this is shit. Like, what am I doing? Fuck me, this is grim. Like, all of the running pictures are just me looking like, horrendously in that point. But flipping back to the point that we came on, I think the thing is, no one posts, well, some people might, no one posts on social media, though, as a general norm, them doing the washing up, them taking the bins out, them fucking clean the toilets, them like tidying up their room, unless that's your page. That might be if you're a cleaning page. But like for the norm, that's not people's highlight reel. Like people aren't posting that, are they? So I think that, yeah, you are right in terms of a lot of the things that you're seeing as an Instagram highlight aren't the boring shit. Like no one, I mean, I couldn't record it, and it's a great example because you can't record in the swimming pool, but no one saw like the times where it was me completely on my own in an empty pool swimming for 2 hours, or like no one sees that sort of stuff that is the boring bullshit, do they? Like it's and not all of life is, well, I suppose I'm fucking going off on where I knew this podcast would be like this, but it's all good. No one sees, not only people see the finish line highlights, no one really sees all of the boring shit you're doing. It's the same in business though, isn't it? It's exactly the same in business. Like you've built.
Well, that's what people do, right? They compare their boring shit to your highlight reel.
Yeah, 100%. Like they're looking at it.
They compare your boring shit to your highlight reel, and that's the big thing, right?
Yeah, 100%, man. Sorry, come on. Oh, have we gone?
Yeah. So but I think it's a really important thing that you were saying there is like that your granddad said, which is a great lesson. It's just try stuff. Yeah. This is probably the thing I'm most guilty of in my life that I need to get myself out of the habit of. And now I'm self-employed. I'm trying to do. I've been to 4 cities in 10 days. I've been to Budapest, Amsterdam, Manchester. I've gone to Liverpool a couple of times. I've gone to the Operator Zoom with you guys. I'm making a point of trying more stuff because I get caught like, oh, is that a good financial decision? You'll always make more money. Always, oh, should I do that? I don't know anyone. Just do. You'll never regret the things you do. And I think it's an important lesson, because I reckon more people end up with these mental health spirals because of things they didn't do in life than they got people that did stuff and thought, I won't do that again.
I 100% agree on that. 100% agree on that. You think if we look at and this is going pretty deep, pretty quick, but it's fine. If we look at the normal modern day man, or we look at, I do coach females from a business standpoint, but like not from a physical standpoint. So like, if we look at a normal modern day man, he goes to school, he works really hard at school, he gets the grades that he wants. He goes to university, he gets the diploma, he gets the fucking graduation, he does his masters, whatever. He gets that qualification. He goes into a job role that maybe he's wanted to go into, or maybe he didn't. Maybe he just ended up in that job role. He buys a house with a partner, and he does all the right things. He has kids, and like he goes through that whole entire process of like just doing the things that we're told we should be doing. And like, actually, there's probably going to come a point, and this is why you look at like statistically, a lot of guys in 40s, 50s have massive crisis points at that point, because they're kind of looking back and they're like, I've done all the things I should have done, but what about what I wanted to do? What about what I thought was a good idea? And like, I think that's it. You forget the idea of like all of the friends you've ever met at some point you didn't know. All of the people that you knew, even at school, at some point you had to go to school and meet these people. All of the people that we've met in terms of from business events, from mentoring events, from fitness events, all of these people, you've had to slightly put yourself out there to experience this. And like, I think, TMP did a great job in terms of when they talked about Roy, and they talked about the idea of like, anyone doesn't know, like TMP is obviously Total Mental Performance. Me and Simon recently been to one of their events, and they talked about like, Rick and Morty talks about the Roy game where, what is it? It's Morty, isn't it? That puts the helmet on and he plays this boring process, and he goes to the carpet shop and he does all the things that it sounds like he should have done. And then like obviously Rick comes in and fucking takes it off the ringer and just goes down this mad like, I'm taking it off the platform. I think like sometimes, not all the time, obviously there needs to be some conservative processes. You need to do some things, society norms. You can't break the law. But you do need to fucking just try shit sometimes. You do need to just go out and I call it literally like just do shit. Like literally just be like, right, I'm not sure about this job role. I'm going to go and apply for a few interviews somewhere else and just see what's out there. If I get an interview and I don't end up taking the job, I'm no worse off. Or I'm going to go and like you've done it tons of times, mate, which is amazing. Like you've moved abroad. That's fucking full on, man. Like if you go and you like, oh, I'm going to try and move abroad. I'm going to see what it's like. I'm going to have a go at that. I'm going to go start this business. I'm going to see what happens with that. Yeah, it's gone really well. I'll keep doing this. Or like, and that doesn't need to be like drastic changes. I am absolutely going on one here. I just realized, but it might be as simple as like internally update things. It might be, I've got this business. This is currently working, but I'm going to update it and I'm going to change it slightly differently and do something different. I'm going to see what happens with it. Do you agree with that, though, in terms of that process of just try shit, man? Just give it a go, see what happens.
Oh, 1,000%. 1,000%. Like I moving to Hong Kong was one of those things where like I always had that itch to move away, and I could have done it lots in my 20s, and I didn't do it. And I made a point. Like a lot of my 20s, I spent trying to be the best personal trainer in the world. And, I'm not the best personal trainer in the world, but like I've got to a point where now I can educate PTs, so it's not wasted time. However, I didn't do the lads' holidays. I didn't travel abroad. I didn't do the stuff. And I got to, like basically 28, 29, whenever it was, I moved to Hong Kong. And I was like, well, I've got this opportunity. It's been given to me. I don't have to go and hunt for it. Like, I'll be dumb to not take this off. And I went there, and like one thing's like 4 years later, I look back at my life and I go, I am a different person I was 4 years ago. Yeah. In part for many reasons, but in part from forcing myself. Like, I found sometimes the most I've learned about myself is times where I've had to sink or swim. So I moved to London, knew no one for a job, sink or swim. Moved to Hong Kong. I didn't know anyone other than my partner. I had to make friends, sink or swim. University. I went to university, I was going to go meet my friend in the student union on the first night of freshers. She went there earlier than me, didn't see her all night, sink or swim. Exactly. And those moments, that's why I like in-person seminars. I will go to an in-person seminar on my own regularly, and sometimes the best thing about that is not knowing people. And I noticed this, no offense to anybody who was at the TMP event that listens to this. I noticed this where you go on, you see the people that are speaking up on stage, right? And some of them, fair enough, I understand, were very nervous, looking at the screen, not looking at us. And some of them came across pretty confident. They're speaking in front of 50, 100 people. Then you speak to them on their own in the intervals, and they don't know how to, they don't understand. They immediately find someone they're comfortable with and speak to them instead. And here's me, you, Dean, who are very comfortable communicating with people, bouncing around the room and going, let's chat to you. How you doing? How's your business? And it's like, that is a skill set that I'm so grateful that I've achieved. And if I never pushed my boundaries, if I'd never moved away from home, I wouldn't have had this skill set. I would have been that person at that event, may not even been at the event, but if I was, I'm in that person who would clung to my one friend in that room. And when people start speaking to me, I'm like, "Hi, yeah, cool. I'm back to my friend."
Oh yeah, 100%. I think I think you're anyone who's never moved to a new town, or anyone who's never had to. I'm not going to call it had to make friends, because that sounds a bit like, oh, friends, but like had to like, reinvent their circles, had to like go and do that stuff. I think if you've never had to do that, you're missing out massively, because like the when you do that once, you're like, oh, you kind of get used to being like, you're like, I'm fine on my own. Like if I'm alone, I'm all right. But then also you get used to the idea of like being able to introduce yourself to people, make connections, and like find groups is perfect. That is one thing I'll say that the military does well, is like every 2 years you have to move draft. So you have to go from, wherever, like, so I was up in Scotland for 2 years and I went down to ship in Albion, and like you have to move. So at that point you're like having to constantly, meet new people, having to introduce yourself, having to like get connections, not reinvent yourself, because that's not the way of saying it, but like get, speak to and communicate with new people. I think that is like a really big skill that a lot of society almost doesn't get. And I think that's what then makes people, like you said, feel like a bit of a caged animal. You're in your box, you're in your office, you speak to the friends in your office, that's it. You go to the same pub, you speak to the same people in that pub. And I'm not slating people going for the pub, I'm just saying, like, if you've never had to put yourself out there, you kind of do feel a bit claustrophobic and a bit caged and a bit like, oh no, maybe not. And they're not taking. It's the same. Like, fuck me, mate. We definitely need to do a part 2. But like, it's the same when you think about dating. Like, dating now is so transactional rather than like it used to be. Like, there was times me and you were what we would have been. We would have been born mentally before the internet was genuinely a thing. So like, there were points where you just have to go out and fucking find, you'd have to speak to a girl. You'd have to actually go up to someone and be like, oh, I'm not really fucking sure. It's a bit uncomfortable, this first initial interaction. Oh, how are you? Oh yeah, I'm all right. And then now it's like, you basically get permission to not look like an idiot before, even going up to someone. So I definitely agree with you, man. I think like, the idea of like, being able to put yourself out there, or like introduce yourself, or like meet people for like authentically, not really sure. It's massive, isn't it? That ability, for sure, man. For sure.
Yeah, the dating analogy is really interesting, right? Because like, I and you a little bit less so, been a bit younger than me, but I remember the days as a teenage boy, right? If you wanted to watch porn, you had 2 options. You either found it in the woods.
Yeah, literally.
Or when I say found in the woods, I'm not meaning dogging. I'm meaning like someone had it ripped to a magazine. You found it and you walked out from school.
Or the sun.
Or you had, or it was like you're on a dial-up internet where you have to listen to that screechy noise, and you get half a boob within a 10-minute radius. Yeah. So like, it was actually more convenient to go and speak to people. And like, I had a hard time with this, right? Like I remember I had a real big hang up around meeting girls and chatting women up. And I always put women on a pedestal of like, right, you must think, they're a 10 out of 10. They would never talk to me. Yeah. And that spawned, this is some of the work I did with TMP, is that a lot of it was me not feeling good enough. And that came from the first girl I ever fancied laughing in my face, breakups, things like this. And one of the things that changed my life was a dating coach called Johnny Cassell, who just reframed it. He says, a girl can only be 5 out of 10 on looks alone. You then have to go and find out if she makes the other 5. And that didn't make me less scared. No. but it was enough of a reframe to make me take the chance, take that leap we've spoken about already a couple more times. And the more I did it, the better I got, the more practice I got. And in turn, eventually, I got more successful wins than failures, and that reframed my whole way of thinking. Compare that to now. I had a friend of mine, I don't think he'll mind me saying this, right? He's a proper Casanova, good looking guy, one of those gifted people you want to think he's a prick because he's just got the genetic hand in terms of looks.
Nice, fair play, man.
But he is promiscuous, and he sleeps with a lot of women. But then you go on a night out with him. I've never seen him chat with a woman in the bar. Never. Not once.
Yeah.
Never seen him go home with someone at a night out that he didn't already arrive at. And the reason is because he's great at the Tinder game. And he's never had to talk to someone he doesn't know. You take him back 20 years, and it's like, could he do it?
Yeah.
Well, he would, because he would learn. That'd be the way he'd have to do it. But it's a different world where people are now behind screens and never actually interacting ever.
100%. And the analogy a little bit of like, I know we're like, well, we've got about 20 minutes, but like, I know the analogy as well is like, you know, we talk about very often with, say, personal trainers or business owners, all these people, like you build skills from trying and failing at things enough time to then have built the skill. Now, I'm not saying, well, yeah, let's not look at it from a dating point of view and try and sleep with people, but let's look at it from an introducing yourself to someone you don't know and have never had any interaction with online or in person. There's a skill set to there to like if you do it a few times and you do get rejected either way, right? As a friendship or as a colleague or as a a dating process, you kind of build from that. And I think that's then lacking. Like skills are built over trial and error, aren't they? They're built over doing things, failing, having to test and adjust and maybe do different approaches, different processes. And that's for like everything. So like, I think that a big problem I see, and this is sometimes what we don't like hammer it home, but we will pretty much say like, look, this is the reality for a lot of you guys. You're not allowing there to be time to then build these skills out and be able to do this in all walks of life, because we are used to now, and it is a problem. I know you talked about it with Dean, and I completely agree with what you guys are saying. Like, there is an issue where instant gratification is like available. It is available. You know, pornography is an instant thing. I've worked through pornography addictions a lot, and it's been something that like I was turning to in stress or worry, or work with 2 different coaches for that, 3 actually different coaches for that to kind of resolve that problem, and we call it like elevate above the problem. There's Uber is a massive thing that's like instant gratification. Tinder is a massive thing that's instant gratification. Like Instagram is instant gratification. But the issue with it, and I think the biggest thing that we now have a problem with, and like I don't slate any of that because I think the invention of them is fantastic. Convenience is great. But the problem being is then that turns to everything else in life. So like, like we say, like a fitness event or for you, it would be like a compositional transformation does take time. It is not an instant thing. That's why I think they will always be valued until the day that someone comes along and they can inject you with something and they say, you're an Iron Man, go and run Iron Man. Or they even steroids now aren't that good, where they could inject you with something and they say, you can get on stage and you perform at the Olympia within a day. Until that happens, they will still be valued. And very often I speak to a lot of guys and it's trying to increase their confidence. It's trying to increase their, help these mental health problems. And a lot of the time we need to do the things that are not instantly gratifying. And when we do those things over a longer period of time, that will help all of the stuff that you're trying to build be at that point. So like it might be the first 10K Tough Mudder, it might be the first event, whatever. And I think that's a massive thing that we're lacking because of all this instant stuff that we're getting, like the ability to build the skills. But do you agree with that, Simon, in terms of that's what maybe is what causes a lot of these problems in terms?
Yeah, and I also think we've become too comfortable. So
Yes.
in the sense of like, yeah. I've said this before on the show that there are inventions now that if you put them on Dragon's Den 15 years ago, they would have said, I'm out. Ice baths, flotation tanks. Imagine going on Dragon's Den 15 years ago and, hey, right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get a bathtub, we're going to fill it full of salt, and you're going to lie in there in the dark. Like, that's not a good business idea, but they make millions because people are now seeking discomfort because life's too comfortable. I'm hungry. Like, people with diet they need to sit with it. Nope, I got on Deliveroo. I think PTing is a different job than when I started 15 years ago, right? People were given a meal plan. We had steak and nuts at breakfast where I used to work, right? And there were adherence struggles for sure, but more people just stuck to it because I'm paying the money. This is what they told me to do. I'm going to do it. Whereas now I find, and no offense to any PT clients out there, but PTing is becoming more and more of a babysitting job than ever before. Because if I don't check in on my client 3-4 times a day, they're going to fall into a box of donuts.
Yes.
And we see this in everything, that people aren't willing to take that first leap. We want to... One Ollie's call yesterday, right? He was talking about podcasts, ironically, and starting your own solo show and then getting someone to edit those solo shows and how to make clips like Ollie's doing, right? And he's doing it very, very well. And so I sat there listening to it, and in the chat, the amount, not calling any individual person out on Supercharged, but the amount of people that were incredibly hesitant, scared, and finding all the reason the sun not to start a podcast was unbelievable. And this isn't even talking to people. This is talking to yourself in a camera.
Yeah.
Like, you can mess it up, you can edit it, you can make yourself look good. And like, if you can't do that, how are you going to speak to a person?
Yes. I think a massive thing, and you've hit the nail here, is personal responsibility. Like, the podcast is called Self-Made, right? You know, that's a big thing of a lot of people. Like, you know, I'll come into it a little bit with some of the mentoring. I don't want this to just be a negative. Like, there are some real positives, but actually, okay, I'll flip this on its head. The people that do the best, rather than talking about the people who maybe don't do as well, the people who I have seen from a business standpoint or from any of that perspective who do the best are the ones who take personal responsibility for what they're doing. They take personal responsibility and they just fucking get on with it. Whereas I think the big issue is when someone questions the reasons they can't do something. Oh, I'm not that confident on camera, I couldn't sit on my own and do this podcast, or oh, I'm not that confident at posting, or any of those things. It's like, well, you're not that confident yet. You're not that confident at the moment. But yes, the first time you walk into a gym, you are not exactly 100% knowing how to do a deadlift. The mechanics of deadlifting will come over the time period of working towards that. You know, that's the biggest thing that I think a lot of us lack. But
you forget that, right?
100%. Yeah, you forget that it takes time.
Sorry to cut you off, but you forget that. You look at your deadlift as a skill you have. You forget how long it took you to get there.
Yeah. And I think, like, that's why an Ironman for me was something that, like, I was like, right, fuck it, I'm going to go and do this because, mate, I'm not going to lie, a year ago, and I've said this a few times, I could not fucking swim. I could not swim, which is quite important when one of the fundamental parts of an Ironman is swimming. Right, I couldn't swim. I could not physically. I could swim breaststroke, which is what the military would train me to do, and with kit on and stuff. I couldn't swim front crawl. Couldn't breathe. Right, literally couldn't breathe. Ollie had the same thing. I think he couldn't physically breathe. So I had swimming lessons for 6 months. I learned to swim. I then was all right with it. But I wasn't like, I wasn't going, oh, I'm not going to sign up to an Ironman because I can't currently swim. I was going, I'm going to sign up to one that's a year later, and I'm going to fucking get on with the training processes now to then do it later on. It's like, anyone who goes into our industry and wants to build a successful business in any realm, personal training, physio, fucking online coaching, whatever they're trying to do, video editing, you won't 100% be perfect at it now. But if you never fucking do it, then you're never going to be good at it. And like, I think that's the issue that Tinder, fucking, you're right, all good, Uber Eats, all these things have unfortunately taught us, is that you can have the instant gratification, but in most things, and I'm sure most of the people that have come on the podcast at some point will have had a journey where there's a level of frustration, a level of annoyance, and things aren't quite going the right way. And that, the reason it's self-made is they've had to push through that, and they've taken responsibility of like, what can I do in this situation that I know will get me through that period? And that, I feel, is anyone who's done incredibly well at anything, there's a level of that somewhere. Of like, it isn't just the coach's fault because you have to do what the coach says. It isn't the mentor's fault because you have to go and do what the mentor says. Like, it's an overall view of everything. I bet you find that with the coaching confidence guys. The guys who do the best are the ones who learn, take responsibility, trial and error, and move forward with it. Really, I bet that kind of happens, doesn't it, Simon? Really, for you.
But even if he's not direct, you absolutely see it. Like, it's the people that show up to calls every week all make the point of watching the back. The people that book in their one-to-ones, because some people just don't book them in because they're scared of being wrong and scared of taking that leap. Right? We see this all the time, and like, the people that book in the course, the people that show up live, the people that do stuff, the people that take action. Like, if we look at some of our heavy hitters, both financially And results wise, we have Liam Smith, runs 3 business. We have Josh, who runs now with Zeus 2 businesses. We have Kian, who's now started the group program. We have Levi, who absolutely kills it. We have Carrie, who's got a full one-to-one schedule. We have Chemo, who's made huge improvements in the last 18 weeks. And like Kevin's smashing it. And these are just a few, but these are the people I see every Monday, Friday. These aren't the people hidden. The people who haven't improved their results, you don't see them. They're the people that vanish. They're the people that do a couple of calls when the novelty's there, and then vanish midway through the course when it becomes the mid, like we spoke about before, the middle bit. And I think if there's a lesson to take away, because I know you've got your power hour, you're going to inspire a bunch of people to take that leap.
Exactly.
If there's a lesson I challenge everybody on this podcast, everybody listening to this now, I want you to think of whether it's the smallest or whatever the next leap is, whether it should be personally or professionally, and I want you to take it. And if it's talking on camera, I want you to remember this. If it's on Instagram, a story will vanish in a day, a live will vanish in a day, and a reel will disappear down your feed quicker than you can imagine if you post regularly. So there is sorry, I've now moved myself to my whiteboard accidentally. I did this sign with my new fancy whiteboard, which is cool. Right. But this is the thing, right? Take that leap. It'll disappear. It's a no pressure situation. No one gives a fuck. Everyone's worried about their own life. They're not cared about what you're doing on a reel. I want you to take that leap. And what I want you to do is I want you to tag me at Kingsley on Instagram, and we'll get Alex's details in a second, and tag Alex. I took the leap after listening to the Self-Made podcast. This is what I did. And I want us to hear what the results were, because I reckon they'll be overwhelmingly positive. I don't think we'll get a tag going, I listened to Self-Made podcast, I took the leap, and I lost both legs, and all my friends hate me, and I've been disowned from the house. It'll be positive. I guarantee it. So take it. And before we go on, so that's a good place to close. So we're going to do a part 2. We're going to dive into the Ironman much more.
I'll add a tiny bit to that as well. Anyone who you look up to as well, go to their first ever post. Take 5 minutes, scroll to the very, 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 very bottom of their feed, go to the first post and read that post and look at the imagery. Because so many people, and I've told people to do this with Ollie, me, you, Dean, go and look at their first post. Because if you're worried about taking the first step, anyone who you look up to in any realm or manner with anything at some point has had to start. So if you don't, you'll never be good. And that's the reality. You're not even great, in any of that process. There has to be a level there to shift that forward. But yeah, mate, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I love that.
I like that. And I also look at your own oldest post. I don't know what my first post on Instagram was. You can do this on YouTube easily by researching oldest, but on Instagram, I don't know. And you find out how far you've come, which makes you go, I can do this too. If you look at, let's say you look at Kassem's first post, and then you look at your own and realize where you are, you go, if I can do this, then I can also get there. So for people that want to follow more about you, Alex, where are people finding you?
So I've got a few places. Best places is Instagram. If it's business-wise and you're like a PT, or I know a lot of PTs or coaches were there, the Instagram, which Alex Gribben Mentoring. If you want to join the Warriors, it's our Facebook page. So you just go on and type Alex Gribben, the Facebook will come up. It's very clear, like the disparity between the two of them. Other than that, obviously Supercharge, obviously Ollie, those guys there. That's pretty much it really. So like Facebook, Instagram. We do have a YouTube, which was sort of changing a little bit, similar to like you said about we're going to be putting out some more podcast-based stuff, because that's something I'm starting literally this week, which is going to be pretty cool. But yeah, that's pretty much me. That's where to find me, really. Awesome. Nice.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll catch you in 3 minutes on the other side, and we'll do a round 2.
Nice. Catch you a bit, Simon.